Max Verstappen has taken a 12-point lead in the Drivers' Championship following the US Grand Prix. Not only this, but Perez has taken 2 podium finishes in a row, and the Mercedes team continue to have concerns over their power unit reliability. But does all this mean that Max Verstappen is now the favourite for his first World Championship in 2021? Let's have a look. My name's Andy, and this is Behind the Drive. The stars seem to be aligning for Max Verstappen as he stretched his lead in the championship following a hard-fought victory at COTA. In this video, I'll look at the factors that have led to Verstappen starting to stretch his legs at the front, including Verstappen's calm approach to the championship battle off the track, an improvement in Perez's performances, and the development of the Red Bull car. Verstappen's approach. One thing that stood out significantly after the US Grand Prix for me was the fact that Verstappen was just so calm after the race. He just put in a brilliant display with tyre management throughout the Grand Prix to then just do enough to keep his pace at the end of the race and prevent Lewis Hamilton from getting into the DRS range. It was a great performance from a driver racing on tyres that were 9 laps older than that of his rival, but his response was calm and measured. He didn't get overly excited about the fact that he just won in the Mercedes backyard of COTA, and he didn't focus too much on his now 12-point advantage in the championship. Instead, he was displaying his awareness of the fact that he's up against one of the best, and that there's still a long way to go in this championship fight. Now, I've been critical of Verstappen's approach on track this season. He's been ruthless in his overtaking and defending, particularly when up against Lewis Hamilton, and it still remains the case that he's tough on track. You just have to look at the run to the first corner to see that he's not willing to give an inch more than necessary when racing Lewis Hamilton. But once the position was lost, it wasn't about going for a desperate move to take his position back. It was about looking to use the undercut to take advantage of the fact that Red Bull had 2 cars in the fight at a circuit where strategy is crucial. Once he made that early first stop, he followed this up with a radio message to the team to ask them to stop Mercedes from going long in the first stint by pitting Perez, to add additional pressure from the undercut from both of the Red Bulls. This is the kind of mental tactics that only the elite drivers can manage. He was setting out to get past Daniel Ricciardo and Charles Leclerc following his pit stop, but still thinking about what Mercedes were up to in the strategy department. Of course, this isn't the first time that this type of strategy has been used in 2021. Verstappen put in a similar tactical approach at Paul Ricard in France, with a late second stop to come back and make the winning overtake on track. At that race, there were also 2 Red Bull cars fighting at the front. But what this shows is that Verstappen is more of a complete driver. His speed has never been doubted. His wheel-to-wheel racing does have some doubts, but his ability to come through the order is world class. And now it's emerging that his strategic driving is some of the best on the grid. And this is where his mindset has been significantly calmer as he's gone through the season. There have been times where I think he's let his anger get the better of him, and most of these times are following on-track battles with Lewis Hamilton. But performances like this one in COTA displayed just how far he's come. But this isn't the only factor that's allowing Verstappen to stretch his legs at the front of the championship. Before I get on to the next point, I want to take a moment to ask you to consider subscribing to Behind the Drive. We've recently hit 20,000 subscribers, and it would be incredible if we could get to 25,000 by the end of the season. Thanks. Sergio Perez's improved performances. Fundamentally, Verstappen's brilliant performance in America was only made possible by the fact that there were 2 Red Bulls in the front 3 up against Lewis Hamilton on his own in the Mercedes. It meant that there was no real concern after the British driver made his move into turn 1. The Red Bull team simply amended their strategy, worked out what was possible, and made an undercut move that left Verstappen in some traffic and caught the Mercedes team and the rest of us off guard. But it was bringing Sergio Perez into the pits that forced the hand of the Mercedes team. They let Verstappen make up around 5 seconds on Lewis Hamilton, making it possible for the Mercedes driver to retain his lead after the first stint. It was a clever move from the team and something that was only possible because of how strong Sergio Perez had been in Austin. The Mexican driver qualified P3 ahead of Valtteri Bottas and forcing the Finnish driver to start even further back given his 5th-place grid drop. It was especially impressive as it's been in qualifying where Perez has struggled in 2021. He's so often ended up 5th or even 6th on the grid and giving himself midfield cars to get past before he can get there to help at the front. This progress tends to take him a few laps, if he's able to get past at all that is, and as such the front runners have often gone off into the distance with a gap that he simply would be unable to bridge through the Grand Prix. In Turkey, Perez was again a bit further back in qualifying, but crucially ahead of Lewis Hamilton following the Mercedes driver's grid penalty. The Red Bull driver did well to get himself into the podium positions, making a few spots early in the race. Fundamentally, he didn't offer much competition for Bottas and Verstappen, who were up at the front, but he was able to defend from Lewis Hamilton and drove a strong race to get himself to third at the finish, his third podium of the season. And momentum's so important in Formula 1. From a driver's mentality perspective, it's so important to be in the right headspace to perform at their best. Bottas is a brilliant example of a driver that sometimes does brilliantly, and at other times struggles to even make overtakes on the midfield cars. Just take Monza for example, where he drove from 19th to 3rd in 2021, but in 2020 he dropped back at the start and failed to make significant progress through the field. Sergio Perez is much the same, and he's had a tough year competing against Verstappen. Fundamentally, he has good and bad races, and he will continue to do so in that second Red Bull car, as all drivers do. But to compete at the front and offer the support to his teammate that the team needs from him, he's got to have more performances like he had in Turkey and COTA. Even finishing 40 seconds off the pace, he'd done enough to put the pressure on Mercedes early on and win the race for the team. And this strong performance from Perez was completed without drinking water in one of the most physically demanding Grand Prix in 2021. It was a brilliant display when he wasn't able to perform at his best, and he still brought it home to take the third step on the podium. This momentum and improvement has come at a perfect time for Perez, as he's upped his game and could well even beat Lando Norris to 4th in the championship come the end of the season, or even help Red Bull sneak the Constructors' Championship. For Verstappen, it's a brilliant environment to be in. He's always going to comprehensively beat Perez over the course of a full season, but Perez will offer valuable support to the Dutchman when fighting for race wins and championships. It's exactly what he's needed for a few years now, and the team seem to have made the right call just in time with that second Red Bull seat. Sure, it could still fall apart, and I expect there'll be at least one race where Sergio Perez struggles to compete at the front before the end of the season, but it's about being there the majority of the time. Red Bull's development. It's no secret that Red Bull have been developing their 2021 car for longer than their rivals, but Mercedes brought updates at Silverstone that seem to have taken a while for the team to get used to and tune in. In particular, this so-called suspension trick which allows them to drop the rear end at a certain speed, which reduces drag and stalls the diffuser. This is something that's a variable at each track and means there's a large variance in the team's performance. We've seen the Mercedes cars be particularly strong at some circuits and less so at others. In Turkey, the Mercedes team were impressively fast on the straights and looked to be quite dominant. But at COTA, it's theorised that they were held back by the fact that the circuit has significant undulation, and the nature of the high-speed turns of Sector 1 meant that they couldn't take advantage of this suspension tweak down the straights. Now this suggests that the Red Bull cars aren't improving, but that's absolutely not the case. One of the key reasons that Verstappen was able to compete in Austin at all was the fact that the Red Bull team themselves have made progress through the weekend. And given these teams now have a greater understanding of their cars, they know how to modify the setups to ensure they perform at their best throughout a Grand Prix weekend. You also can't forget the fact that Honda bought an energy store upgrade to their teams for the second half of this season, something that's brought with it a boost in power. This commitment to the team and the championship has almost certainly helped them close the straight line speed deficit that Mercedes had built. In addition, it's been said that Alex Albon has been doing a brilliant job for the Red Bull team in the simulator, and given his recent experience racing for the team in 2020, this is something that's a particular advantage for Red Bull. I'm sure by this point in the season the Red Bull team are no longer developing their car, but they do have many parties pulling in the same direction to ensure they have the best car at each of the races for these closing stages of the season. With 5 races to go, we'll be visiting Mexico, a track which is traditionally tough on engines and a historic Red Bull stronghold. Brazil, another track which Red Bull tend to fare well at, and then the 3 circuits in the Middle East, with Saudi Arabia and Qatar being new to the F1 calendar, and Abu Dhabi, which is a circuit which Verstappen won at last year by 15 seconds. So it's safe to say that these circuits coming up could well favour the Red Bull, or at least they have done traditionally. But given the trophy changed hands in COTA, a track where Mercedes have tended to come out on top in the past, anything could happen in these last 5. Overall, with Verstappen's calm approach to the championship outside of the car, combined with improvements in performances from Perez, and the fact that Red Bull and Mercedes have cars which are of very similar standard, we're definitely in for a brilliant last 5 rounds. And for me, after what we saw in America, I think Verstappen's a pretty clear title favourite. That's my thoughts, but what do you think? Let me know who you think will win the championship in the comments, and if you want to find out my thoughts on Verstappen's approach on track, then take a look at this video as well.